social media, we found really a disturbing picture, and it happened right here in the valley, down in Ahwatukee, Desert Vista High School. You had a number of seniors line up and spell out something that basically summed up their year, best graduating class or whatever, best class you'll ever see, 2016. Well, that wasn't really the story. The story was that six girls separately decided to take a picture, and they lined up with letters on that were on their T-shirts to spell out best class you've ever seen, 2016. Yeah. They spelled out a different word, the N-word. And
the girls wore shirts spelling out the N-word.
Right.
Two of the letters, the two G's, were replaced by an asterisk, and they smiled in the picture. And you scratch your head and say, what the heck is going on? Yeah, so one of our reporters is down at the Tempe Union High School District right now, finding out what's going on with these girls. This went, of course, because it's social media, went viral nationwide. Right. A number of people, a number of students, a number of African-American students want these girls expelled. We haven't heard anything about that. But one of the things we discussed last week, and we've discussed for a number of different times, whether talking about Oklahoma University, ASU, the girls out in the West Valley that were beside a cotton field getting their inner N on. They tweeted that.
And they tweeted that out. Is the N-word just another word to kids, let's say, under the age of 25? Well, joining us now as a recovering English major, I would have loved to have had this professor, Dr. Neil A. Lester. He's a foundation professor of English and founding director of Project Humanities at ASU, and he has a course, The N-Word, an anatomy lesson, and we welcome Dr. Lester. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
We're good. Has the N-word lost its meaning to kids?
Well, words have not lost their meaning, and what the students, as I see it, have lost or never had was a connection to the history that's connected to the word. So words have always mattered, and they continue to matter, and they mattered in this sense because they knew, I'm not in their head, but there is some sense with the sort of self-congratulatory smiles that they knew exactly what they were doing. Now, they may not have known the extent of the consequences, but they certainly knew what they were doing. That was very calculated. That wasn't spontaneous.
And I agree with you. It was absolutely calculated. They knew what they were doing. They knew what word they were spelling out.
Yes.
But do they not understand what the word means? Do they hear the word so much that it's a nothing word to kids? Or are these six racist girls?
Well, you're conflating something, because the way that they spell this word, there is no question about its racial disparagement. What can be contested, however, is this sort of delusional sense that if you spell it with different endings, whether it's a G-A or a G-A-H, that somehow has taken on a different meaning. Okay. That's where the delusion comes in. But that word, as they spelled it out with the ER, there's no question about that. And not all whites use it. And certainly black people don't feel comfortable around that word typically.
But are they racist? See, that's the what's going through their heads, doctor, because are they saying this is a word that doesn't mean what everybody else thinks it means? I'm a kid. We use this word. We put the slang on the end sometimes. I'm trying to figure out, do these six girls not like black people?
Well, I don't know how helpful it is to attach a label to that, because once you've attached a label to you can certainly attach a label to their behavior, but you're asking the question, which should be asked to those students, is why did you do it? What did you expect to get? But they clearly know the meaning of the word, or there wouldn't be the sort of self-congratulatory smiles on their faces. So, and this, again, was not something spontaneous. It was clear that in one sense they could say, well, we really didn't spell it out because we left the G's out. Well, but we know what the word is, but there was no sense that they were trying to hip-hop it up, because hip-hop doesn't use that word with the ER. Now, my question to those who, want to blame this on hip-hop is that, this is in many ways, a reflection of a tenor that is part of our nation at this moment, and we can look at historically. When we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and we're talking about language, and we're talking about the ways in which language reflects how we think or don't think, then this is not something that people should be surprised by, particularly where we are in the Southwest and where we are in this nation since 2008. So I'm not quite sure why people are outraged or surprised. Race has always mattered.
Dr. Neil A. Lester is a professor of English, also the founding director of the Project Humanities at ASU, and he has a course called The N-Word, an anatomy lesson. You bring up an interesting point, Dr. Lester, that people should not be surprised. Where I went to school, African American kids were told not to go into town, after dark. We all knew where the Grand Dragon lived in town.
Correct.
That was in the 80s and 90s. I'm not that old that this was before the 60s. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
When you say that this is not surprising, I guess what surprises us is how do white kids actually think they can use that word? What gives them the power, or what have they not been taught, or what do you see that white kids are actually able to say the word and use it and not fear that there's any consequences?
Well, what's interesting, though, is that they don't see bodies hanging from poplar trees. They don't see those signs that say colored water fountain and white water fountain. So in many ways, that sort of historical moment that is most associated with that is not part of their reality. And if they hear some version of it, and they even have black friends who may be using it among themselves, then they give themselves permission. But that's where we get the disconnect, though, is you cannot talk about the present without looking back to see where things are in the past, because the past becomes the present.
So could you as a professor teach them that, or do they just hear it as, no disrespect, an old man talking about something that happened way back when it doesn't really apply to me?
Well, if they pay attention to what's happening around them, they'll see that this is not just about the past.
Right.
I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement comes out of something. And to say that Black Lives Matter is not to say that other lives don't matter. So in order to understand that historically, you've got to know some of the things that happened with Emmett Till, and some of the things that happened during slavery, and some of the things that happened during Jim Crow. But if they don't see that and they have no awareness of it, but what's interesting here, though, is this was not done innocently. There was something, again, I keep saying very calculated and premeditated about this, and the self-congratulatory smiles suggest to me that the students do know what this word means.
And that they may have been getting away with something.
And the other thing is, people often say, well, I wasn't calling anyone that word.
Oof.
So, I was just spelling it out. And it's, Dr. Laura said that when she spewed out a few years ago this on her radio station. So, as President Obama said, and got into a little bit of hot water by using the word, today people don't have to be racist because we have racism without racists. So there are people who have unconscious biases, and again, they didn't go up to somebody and burn a cross or wear a hood. What they did was they spelled out a word, and didn't really spell it out, but they did spell it out. So there's a certain kind of calculated trickery that's assumed when that behavior comes up. But the real question should be to those three young women as to why they did it, and there may be such stuff that they're not even aware of why they did it.
Six Valley seniors, they're in trouble after taking a racist picture.
Yes.
We're talking to Dr. Lester from ASU. Has the N-word lost its meaning to kids? I know that there is racism everywhere. I get it. How about Arizona? Because the fact that Arizona has certainly a black community, but not as big a black community as other states. Do we have a bunch of white kids here in Arizona that don't know black people? And they don't know what they've gone through.
They don't know the experience. They don't have the experience.
They don't know the history. Is that something that is unique to Arizona?
Well, it's certainly not unique to Arizona. I teach students from around the globe, and in my first semester teaching here in 1997, first semesters, I had not, more than one student come up and say, Dr. Lester, I'm not sure how I will do in your African American literature course because I haven't been around black people. That is such a loaded assumption that my literature course would be any different than a Shakespeare course, that we would talk about images, we would talk about themes, we would talk about structure, we would talk about theory that has nothing to do with how many black people you've been around.
Right.
But the fact that they would make that assumption, and the fact that they would somehow presume that that's what a grade at a university would be based on, is really troubling. What was equally troubling is the fact that there are still places in this country, not just in Arizona, where you could really have no contact with black people. Now, you certainly can't say black people will have no contact with white people in this country. White people are everywhere. They're on your radio. They're in your television. They are on your billboard. So, my experience that was the reversal of this was going to Ghana and seeing all of these brown/black people and not seeing any white people there. So this is all that we know. Yes, we have a system of white privilege and white supremacy in this country. Now, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about systems that have rewarded people based on skin color.
What should, in your opinion, what should happen to these girls? Should they've been called for expulsion? They've been called a bunch of names. What do you think the school district should do to these girls?
Well, I have no expertise in that area about discipline. What I would love to do is stand before, as I have done with many groups, and sort of have a critical conversation about language, about critical thinking, and also about this word in particular. I do talks across the valley, across the country, whether they're in workshop forums, but this is really about a conversation. I have to believe that when people know better, they do better.
Have you told African-American kids, though, the N-word is not acceptable? We hear it all the time in music. We see it in hip-hop culture. Have you told African-American kids, hey, look.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, why would there be an assumption that I wouldn't tell African-American kids that?
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure that that everybody understood that this shouldn't be a one-sided conversation about the N-word.
Well, that's not how I do things. But I also don't suggest that this is a word. Some reporters want me to say that you should never use the word. Well, I don't think that. I think if you're trying to recreate a historical moment legitimately, if you're writing about the civil rights movement and you're talking about the racial tension there, or you're talking about integration, you should certainly use it in a kind of documentary form. But what I'm hearing is this sort of social casualness with language. It's not just with the N-word, but it's with the G word and the B word and all the other words that we have euphemized. So this is a conversation about language. It's a conversation about identity. That's what I'd like to talk, not just to those students, but all students, and not just to the students, but also the staff and the administrators and the teachers.
Dr. Neil Lester, Dr. Neil Lester, a guy, again, I wish I had him as an English professor when I was in school.
Oh, I wish you were in my classes. I listen to you all the time and wish I had you both in my class.
We did. Now, that's a loaded question.
I don't even know what that means.
And Pamela and Bruce, too.
Well, good.
Yeah, include everybody.
Trust me, I would welcome your perspective in my class, all right?
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lester. We appreciate it.
It's such a word that I'm always scared of. I don't like to look at it. I don't like to read it. I don't like to sound it out in my mind. And I can't figure out why kids just spew it out.
Right, but we can't forget the word either.
I know.
Because then you don't know the history of it.
Yeah.
And like we said, down in Tempe Union High School District, they're having a press conference now.
Yeah.
About these girls using the N-word or taking a picture of the N-word. We'll tell you what the latest is on that when we find out.
Yeah, Becky Lynn's coming up in a couple of minutes. The news flash, stick around.
Mac and Gados, KTAR News.